Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's Quidsta Agro press briefing ahead of the Trico Forestry Campus, which is taking place in Kitzbühel from today through Thursday. A total of 80 experts from North America and Europe are taking part. The aim is to jointly discuss measures, ideas, and strategies that contribute to sustainable reforestation. As Stig Holm has to apologize for today, we have 5 experts who are speaking to you today, who will first make short statements and then are available for questions. I would ask you to enter the questions in the Q&A field and not the chat. And as we have 5 experts, with us today, I would also like to ask you to also write to who the question is addressed to. There will be also a press summary of the Trico Forestry Campus after the event. This allows me to introduce the first 2 experts from the host Quidsta Agro. First is Catalina Bardewyk, who heads the proprietary biological product division, and Thomas Rogy, who is sales manager for repellents. Dear Catalina, please give your statement.
Thank you, Mike, for these introductions. Dear ladies and gentlemen, valued editors, I'm very happy to see so many of you today present for the press briefing ahead of this event. You might wonder, why did Quidsta Agro choose to host such an event? And the answer is quite simple. The world is in danger, and not only the world, but especially our forests. If we look at 2022, we have exceeded already 5 of our 9 planetary boundaries. And to this belongs loss of biodiversity, climate change problematic, and a deforestation. We all know that the world is increasingly fragile and in danger. I mean, you only have to look at the last years. We are speaking about climate catastrophes. We're speaking about a corona pandemic, which we had for 2 years. And we're speaking now about a war in Europe. So I think all of us are aware that we have to address significant challenges together. So how can we use our resources efficiently to support a growing population? How can we ensure an intact environment, including forests, today and for the future? And that are vital questions we have to ask ourselves. The agricultural industry has quite an important role to play in addressing those challenges. But of course, it can't do it in a way like it did in the past. So the agricultural industry already embarked on a way of transformation. So it's around transforming from a traditional agriculture to a modern agriculture. It's around evolving from using products to using solutions. And what for me is way more important is to get away from a silo thinking, but start a system thinking across boundaries. And that is something what we want to aim at also with this event. We within Quidsta Agro already embarked on this way of transformation. So I'm very proud to announce that we have in our distribution business over 20% of our sales in Austria with biological products today. And in forestry globally, it's even 100%. In our contract manufacturing, we have now 30% of our volumes with biological products, and that volume is strongly increasing. And in our proprietary products business, 100% of our R&D is focused on natural solutions. And over the next couple of years, I'm proud to announce that we will bring 10 products into the market for agriculture, forestry, and pest control. Trico has been the first biological product which we launched almost 2 decades ago, and now we are entering a second wave of introduction of proprietary biological products, following the motto from nature for nature. One of the examples is Ceylon, a product based on a natural occurring fungi, which we just launched 2 years ago and where we obtained the prize for the best biological product worldwide, which was quite an honor for Austrian family-owned company playing along with the big league of companies. So if we talk about transformation, that is nothing what a company can do alone. You need partners. You need partners to really enable a sustainable future in agriculture and forestry. And we as Quidsta Agro always have worked a lot with partners, be it in research, development, production, or even sales. You can even say partners run in our DNA. And it's not about partners just in your very close proximity, be it within your industry or be it within your region. You have to have an open approach to it. You have to think wider, you have to think globally and beyond the industry. And that is also why we host this event over the next couple of days together. It's an event which brings together a wide set of stakeholders in forestry all over the world, from Sweden over the south of Europe, over to North America and Canada. And we have representatives from academia, from the industry, from forestry, and from associations as well as politics with us to discuss jointly how we can address the challenges and what solutions we can find for sustainable reforestation. We have quite an exciting agenda ahead of us. We will start today with the renowned Professor Susan Simmert from British Columbia University in Canada. She's well known for her concepts on the mother tree. And this is basically around how a mother tree, a hub, supports other trees by giving away resources, by kind of fostering resilience in the system. And that is basically very nicely connected to our motto of the event, Growing Together. The second keynote speak will be from Mr. Grieshofer, from Austropapier, the Association of Paper and Pulp Industry in Austria. And so he will take us way more to an industry approach. So how can wood and paper be used to reduce our fossil fuel dependency? And the following day, we will have time to deep dive into lectures, like from Peter Meyer later, into panel discussions and into deep dives around different topics such as who owns the forest, who's responsible for reforestation, and also about successful reforestation strategies, including deer management. So what are the challenges which lie ahead of us? We are speaking about 1 trillion trees which we want to sustain globally. We are speaking about 3 billion trees which we want to plant in Europe additionally until 2030. And if you speak with practitioners, they will tell you we need a reforestation rate of 5 to 10% in the industrial world. So that's an awful lot of trees we are talking about, but it's for sure not sufficient to plant them. You need to also protect them because each single tree counts. And that is in the end, what is the event about? How can we work together and what can also Quidsta Agro contribute for successful reforestation strategy? And with that, I would like to hand over to Thomas Rogy, our forest and repellent expert.
Well, thank you very much, Catalina, for the introduction. Oh, dear ladies and gentlemen, actually it's due to Trico, the best natural deer repellent, we have this opportunity and pleasure to hold this event here in the Austrian Alps. With many people here, we can look back to a successful cooperation of more than 10 years. With some of them, it's even close to 20 years already. Trico is now successfully sold in 21 countries in Europe, since last year also in the US, and we got the registration just now in May also in Canada. Well, who would have thought so now 20 years ago? Well, some of you may remember it's now 20 years ago at the end of the last millennium. Several heavy storms led to dramatic calamities in the Austrian forests. Foresters were challenged to work up the tremendous damage. They had to replant the forestry successfully and also sustainably, what meant a lot of planting and protection of plants, protecting them from being browsed, had to be done, which was challenging and still is challenging due to the quite high densities of deers we have here in Austria. We're cautious of that and also being aware of conflicts of interests like recreation needs, hunting, forestry, operations, deers who want to browse on plants, and plants, of course, who want to grow. Employees and practitioners of Quidsta Agro remembered the old method of wrapping sheep wool around little saplings to protect them from browsing. This method has a decent efficacy, but only a short-lasting effect, and of course, it's impractical to do on larger scales. So hence the goal was to take this wool effect and bring it into a neat and easy-to-use formulation. Long story short, with the support of Quidsta's experienced formulation experts and several months of intense trialing, which was definitely needed, a long-lasting, easy-to-use and highly effective formulation was developed, registered, and immediately sold. Registering in Austria and now also in the EU is quite a demanding process. Yeah? So, but at the end, this was the start of the really successful Trico story. With the quantities we produce now, around 300 million plants can be protected per year. So, more than 20 years later, Trico has become the gold standard of Europe on the European repellent market and is on the way becoming a game changer for American forestry. In the US, until now, no product could meet the requirements of successfully protecting young plants for a longer period due to the fact that it didn't stick long enough on it or simply lose the efficacy over weeks. Yeah? With Trico, this is changing now. Yeah? So far, all trials we have done in America have given excellent results. We have done trials with universities like Cornell. We have done trials with Christmas tree farmers. We have done trials with big landowners and also with the chestnut foundations. And a lot of these trials were also managed by our scientific advisor, Brian Roth. And also on arable land in the southeast, we have done a lot of trials in cooperation with local universities. Forest owners, foresters, and state departments are already looking for Trico and are even supporting us to overcome registration hurdles we face. Besides this, farmers in the southern US states are already protecting soya fields and corn fields and also cotton fields with Trico, meaning Trico is really becoming a game changer. The word of mouth is spreading in the US and Canada, and this is really the next step in the Trico success story. Yeah? Based on that experience we have, we are also working now on new natural products for the use in forests, like mechanically protection against Hylobius, and also further the developments on natural ingredients or natural microbials, which hopefully will be similar successful as Trico. For Trico, there is still a lot of work to do, so especially distribution in North America is quite challenging. Yeah, with this, I would like to hand over to Peter Meyer, who is a forestry expert, can give more insights in the Austrian and European forest.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to give you a little bit of context on what it means, how forests and trees play a role in many aspects of our society. We started off with some of the big challenges, and this in fact is something we always should be aware of, the mega trends we are living in. Despite the climate crisis and the biodiversity issues, also the overpopulation and the growing population, urbanization, digitalization, and so on are aspects that we all face as citizens and as a society as a whole. And the interesting thing is that forests and trees always play a role in these trends, but they are very different. And that is something we always should ask ourselves. What do we want from a forest? Should it store carbon? Should it protect biodiversity? Should we use it for bioenergy, for biomass, for building wooden houses? Should we use it for recreation and health? So you see, there are many aspects that we have to consider when we talk about forests and trees and all the trends that surround us. When it comes to policy making, you will realize that there are many policies that address one of these issues, but you talked about systems, and that is also something that is very important for the future, to leave the silos and think about systems and how to bring all these aspects together, so to find new ways and coordination mechanisms when it comes to an integrated view on forests and all the interests that we have on them. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is probably one of the most challenging things that we are facing, and also forests are affected by climate change. So as all ecosystems, as we as humans are affected by climate change, also forests need to adapt to the changing climate. But to say one thing very much upfront, it's about CO2 reduction that will change our climate, and that will be very important for all of us to make a difference. So forests and trees can play part of the role, but will not be in the position to solve all the CO2 emission problems that we're facing worldwide. So when it comes to adaptation, the future forests are mixed forests. And this is something where we try also to distribute the risk that forest owners face when planting trees in the future. And deer management is also one of the aspects that is very important when it comes to having a fit forest for the future climate. We as Austrian Research Center for Forests have developed a traffic light system where we provide advice to forest owners and people interested in forests on which trees will grow in a future climate and what we recommend which trees you should plant to be able to have a vital forest for the coming years under climate change. One aspect is always about carbon storage in trees and forests. Our research has found that there are two aspects that are very important. One is sustainable forest management, and the other one is that you should use wood for construction and other materials so that you can store the carbon that comes out of the forests for a long period, also in wooden construction and tables and whatever you have made out of wood. So this is very important for a future that is good for storing carbon. My last point, innovation and resource efficiency are probably the most important aspects for a sustainable society for the future. Circular bioeconomy is one of these concepts that will be very important also for us to consider, and forests and trees play a very important role in that aspect. Our societies change, and as the COVID crisis, for example, has demonstrated, health and recreation is very important, especially when it comes to urban societies and the forests surrounding urban areas. Also, green jobs are a very interesting aspect in this change, because jobs will change and also opportunities will arise when it comes to this transformation of our society. And last but not least, coming from a research organization, evidence is very important. Evidence-based decision-making will help to find a successful way for the future. Thank you.
Well, Peter,
I hand over to Florian.
Thank you very much for basically doing the whole introduction. I'm from the Bavarian State Forest Enterprise. We are the largest land manager or forest manager in Central Europe, and we manage 1/3 of Bavaria's forests, all the state forests. For us as managers in the field, we are faced with all the problems that Peter, for example, highlighted, but we also identified, well, same as everyone, climate change as being the most demanding factor in the last couple of years, in the last 100 years of organized forestry, that we have to battle. So for us, the solution is sustainable forestry can only be done in managed working forests. We have to build resilient and resistant stands for the future. And for us, that can only be done by professionals. It can be done by, well, it has to be done by having at least 4 different tree species in every stand. So basically our challenge is to rebuild pure stands all over Bavaria into mixed stands that will be even more important in the future. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we plant. First of all, we rely on, well, second of all, well, natural regeneration has to come into effect. And in order to protect all that, we need a professional and purposeful wildlife management. That basically means hunting. And in order to conduct a professional hunting management, we need the public. We can't do it ourselves. So we, as a company, do at least 80% of our hunting with the support of private hunters. And without the public, that big goal of adapting our stance to the climate change will not be successful. And Brian will give the perspective from the other side of the ocean now.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Florian. And thank you, Catalina and Thomas and Quidsta for inviting me to this very nice event here, the Trico Forest Campus, and to share my perspective from North America. North America is a very big place. What I'll talk about today is from Canada and United States. I'm a dual citizen, so I have experience on both sides of the border, so I'll talk about it as a whole. We have 17% of the world's forests exist in North America, so a very large area. We haven't been managing for as long as you have in Europe, but we have a lot of managed forests. As a matter of fact, 90% of the forests in the United States are under active management. About 1/3 of the area in Canada and the United States is forested, so we're talking about a large area with many different regions and local challenges. But the biggest challenge we have across the continent is really with catastrophic wildfires. In addition to this, we have insect outbreaks on big scale, disease outbreaks. There are invasive plants and animals and insects that are arriving all the time and causing trouble, as well as some native species. And then all of this is exacerbated, as was mentioned before, by climate change. So we're really coming to some big challenges and some tipping points. And the more and more challenges on reforestation and sustainable forestry. One of the interesting things with our deer population, Florian mentioned how they're managing their population in the Bavarian forests. In North America, we have really reduced our predators. And this is, has significant downstream interactions and impacts, because with fewer predators, the population naturally grows. So our deer population in some parts of North America is at extreme levels. And we're seeing some huge impacts on regeneration of our natural forests, challenges with planted forests, but this has long-term impacts on forest composition. So the mixed species that we talk about and had naturally are becoming more and more uniform, and this is a direct impact of deer pressure, browse pressure in some areas. And so we would like to find some solutions to manage, if we can't manage the deer population, we should be able to protect the seedlings. And this can be done through either physical barriers, either fencing, or building these big things called slash walls where you pile up debris in a perimeter around the area you're trying to harvest. So some really expensive and difficult solutions. Other products that are on the market for deer repellents have been around for a long time, but they need to be reapplied often. They don't always work under certain conditions. So forest managers have always faced this challenge of how to manage the deer browse pressure on their forests. And I've been very excited to have been involved with some of the early testing and development of trico in North America, both in different parts of the continent, on the East Coast, in the natural forests, and on the West Coast with planted forests, and in Canada. It has great potential and promise. The data is exciting to see. So we have evidence that it works in North America, and I think there's a huge demand. And with that, I'm quite excited to see that we have an opportunity to try trico and make some differences in how we manage our forests in North America. So I will conclude with my statement.
So thank you very much to everybody for your statements. Now it's time and place to ask questions. So we wait a moment if there are questions coming in, as they have to be written. Maybe a first questions until question from journalists arrive. Brian Roth has spoken about diseases in forests in the United States and North America. And question to Florian, Noll, and Peter Meyer: are there diseases in Austria or middle of Europe who are also a big problem? Maybe Peter Meyer first.
Yes, I mean, I think I wouldn't call it necessarily diseases, but pests and insects. And so one of the most famous insects is the bark beetle, obviously. And there you could also see the effects of climate change, of drought, that some of the trees, Austria, but also in Bavaria and the parts of Germany, did not have enough water in the summer months, and so were very easy targets for bark beetle, and led to big problems and dying trees in large areas in Austria and in Bavaria. So that is one of the issues and one of the effects you can see from climate change and drought. And maybe as a second, I mean, every tree has an insect or a pathogen, so I mean, you can, it's a long list. But what also happens due to climate change is that you have invasive species traveling across the globe, like blind passengers. You distribute also these insects and pests across the globe, and so that also leads to new challenges for all of our countries, and new measures and detection and also prevention measures that we are all facing. The Asian longhorn beetle, for example, is one of those that can now survive in Europe because winters are not as cold and as long periods cold than they used to be. So those insects that probably also have been here before can now survive and pose a lot of damage to trees. So these are just two highlights of what happens when it comes to pests and diseases. But I'm sure, Florian, from practical management in Bavaria, you have many examples.
Well, bark beetle, of course, is the most challenging one at the moment, but it's also a chance for us, because if it's not a catastrophic event on a stand level, it enables us to rebuild forests in the holes, in the gaps developed by the beetle. So that is, yeah, it's a challenge, but for me, or for us as a company and for us as managers, the bigger effect is if bark beetles damage huge tracts of timber, the impacts on the global economy are felt even in North America. Europe flooded the market a couple of years ago with European timber simply because there was so much around of bark beetle killed wood that North American suppliers were actually, well, shutting down. at some point. And another disease that is quite common and actually led to, well, almost to the extinction of a whole tree species is in ash. Like we've been using huge tracts of or huge stands of ash that actually provided, well, valuable timber. They were pretty resistant and resilient up to that point, and were actually thought of as being one of the species that could actually cope with climate change. And now within 10 years, it started 10 years ago, and within those 10 years, well, we have basically been losing ash left, right, and center. And in some areas, there's none left. So,
can I just complement what you're saying? Because ash, that's one of the things I think where we also have solutions. So we have in Austria, we have probably the largest European field trial on resistancy on ash. So we took all those ash that did not die. It's not many, but we took them and had a large trial system by finding out which genetic variety will survive this pathogen. And I think it's very promising. And so we will have a comeback of ash, but it will take some time. Nature takes some time to grow and to have healthy trees. But it's just one of the examples again where research and can help to save tree species that due to pathogens seemed to be lost.
Okay, next one. Brian Roth has talked about predators and that the hunting had an effect on browsing and the pressure by deer. Another question about that is, does climate change affect browsing by deer because there is not enough grassland or something else they can eat? Are there more problems around that?
Yeah, so this question about if the climate has influenced the deer populations, and it has. In some areas, it's reduced the population because the winters are kind of longer with snow in certain areas. Other areas, there's less snowpack, so the deer has more chance to browse on things other than the woody material that's up through the trees. So that would be probably the biggest thing, is that the availability of food changes with snowpack.
Okay, and same question to Florian, Noll, and Peter Meyer. Are there any studies or something else who can say that the deer pressure is rising because of climate change? Is there something on data available?
well, I wouldn't go as far as attributing everything to climate change, but we can say that in Central Europe, starting in 1990, after one of our biggest storms, forestry started, well, rethinking the way forestry is done. So we started building mixed stands, and therefore we have, well, increased habitat quality significantly over the last 30 years. And of course, that has an effect. You have a better habitat, you have more deer. Then you have, in parts, you have warmer winters, so you have less mortality, and that all plays into effect. But in our opinion, the improved habitat quality is probably the biggest effect, whether that's linked to climate change or not.
And I think related to that, it's also quite interesting to see what deer is browsing, and it's not so much if climate change is now affecting the taste buds of deers, that definitely not, but it's a little bit like humans. If you have some abundancy of a tree, yes, you eat it, but if there's suddenly something else there which is a little bit more rare and a little bit more tasty, you of course go for that. And if Florian now talks about creating more climate tolerant forests and having this mix of species in the forest, then I would say it's safe to say that deer, especially like the new species, which are a little bit of a higher value trees and which you want to get through.
Maybe just to complement what you already said, I mean, we do the deer monitoring in Austria for many, many years, and also We have a Austrian-wide monitoring system on forests where we also evaluate the influence of deer. And what we can see is that there is a steady increase in deer and also the effects. So that is something that is very serious. We have to, and I think that's also one of the reasons we sit here together and see how can we improve the situation, because, and again now, a fit forest for the future, we need also conditions for the trees and the forest to grow healthy. And so deer management and the population of deer is an issue, and therefore it's important to have a debate about that and find constructive ways forward.
And last question, as Thomas and Catalina has spoken about Trico and the use of it, what is the concrete tip you give for foresters? What mix they should make to keep deer from browsing? So what is a mix you can make, and how do you use Trico in a larger strategy?
Well, maybe if I start, so and then you can take over. Yeah? So, Trico is sometimes a solution, but usually it's one part of deer management. Yeah. So you have to take care about the genetics you have in your forest. You have to take care about the deer population, which is usually unpopular to say, but I think it's needed to do. So meaning usually Trico is one part of the solution. Yeah. So for a practitioner like you, probably there are certain other things you're really looking and taking care of. So it's population, it's genetically having different species in your forest, of course, and maybe also have to feed them somewhere else.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, it's as you said, Thomas. That's totally true. I mean, it's a mixed bag of different protection measures that you have to take. Of course, for applied management, hunting with the support of the public is the cheapest way. But since I guess we all agree that it's not the only solution, and we're dependent on repellents such as Trico, and Trico for us has the added benefit that the application is fairly straightforward, fairly easy, and of course fast and cheap. And that's well, let's be honest, that's a selling point to landowners, especially in Europe, where, well, the population is aging and forestry workers do not grow on trees. We have less and less every year. So that's one aspect to be kept in mind as well.
And I think one point is also considering the different interests, so recreation, forestry needs, of course. So what you can do with Trico is you protect the single plants you want really to take taken care of, but you're not pushing out the deers of the forest. So you're not fencing it, so you keep them in the forest, they just feed on something else.
But again, I think a lot, and you mentioned that has to do with population management, so I think that is a very crucial point for many aspects of trees. And I mean, we're here in Kitzbühel, there are many mountainous forests that have a protective role for infrastructure for us as human beings. And we see that is very critical also in those forests that protect us. That also there it is very important to have clever strategies for the future when it comes to population of deer.
Okay, as there are no other questions, I say thank you for the podium, for taking part in the press briefing, and for the journalists to link into the live stream, and wish a nice Tuesday, and thank you and goodbye.